in about 10 seconds. Obviously, there's still plenty of people that will be joining us, but we are now live on Facebook for all of our viewers at home.
Ms. Robinson, I believe it's just you and me. At least live on Facebook.
Okay, perfect.
I'm here.
Let me see.
Hello.
Hey, Darren Least, how are you?
I'm good. My dog's barking right now, so I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. There's a reason I do these meetings here in the office, just because
Well,
I love my kids, but
If you had seen the meeting on the council meeting on Monday night, there was a time where someone said, "Is there a second?" And President Jenkins' dog barked at that exact time. I was really, now if I had been running it, I would have said, "Second by the dog." I don't think that counts, but something along. But it was so perfectly timed.
Chris, I don't know if I have a camera on the computer at work. Do I?
You do. We see you.
No. I'm at home right now.
We'll get you one, whether you like it or not.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have one yet.
We had to get you that chair first.
Right. Yeah. Very nice one. Thank you.
All right, Chris, can you admit Chester Christie in if you still have the ability for that?
yeah, I just did. I'm texting with April Darling. I think she's having a
For all of you just joining us, we are live on Facebook at this moment in time. As soon as all of the members of this inaugural Civilian Review Board are available, we will let them in the meeting, and City Attorney Schultz will take over.
Sorry, all that clanking.
We're still waiting on a couple more members. Good to see you, Sergeant Gregory. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Oh, I think April made it. Hold on.
Yeah, I was not notified of anyone that was unable to make it, so everybody should be here.
We got Mrs. Ross coming on now. I think we are just missing Carrie Fletcher and Sharon Bajai.
All right, Mr. Shook, I will go ahead and leave you to this particular meeting as soon as everyone else gets on. If you have any
Yeah.
questions or anything, please give me a text. I will be back.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Wonderful meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for your service in this regard. It is a big responsibility that you take, and we are proud that you were willing to be in this position. So thank you again very much. And believe it or not, you will learn so much throughout this entire process, not just tonight, but in the entire process. So have a great rest of your evening.
I think we'll give the, we're missing 2 people right now. I think we're going to give them about 5 more minutes at least, just to make sure. It's the first meeting, and if you don't use Zoom regularly, it can be a little confusing at times.
Sarge, it's good to see you. How you enjoying your retired life?
I don't have to shave as often.
That's got to be a good thing, right?
I'm still getting used to it.
I can only imagine.
It's quite different.
Yep.
So does anybody here on the board know anybody else here on the board?
This is Raina. I have the privilege of knowing Miss Evelyn Robinson.
Mhm.
I know my husband friends with she and her husband.
Okay. Neat. Anybody else?
Yes, Chester Christie. I likewise have the privilege of knowing Evelyn Robinson. We were actually law school classmates.
Oh.
A year apart. She started young. So I've got an excuse for all the gray.
I too like to say I have the pleasure of knowing Miss Robinson. So we have 3 attorneys on the board then, is that right?
Eric, what kind of law do you practice?
I practice business law, business litigation, little corporate transactions. I have dabbled in criminal law in the past before too, so I'm very familiar with that aspect as well too. Also a Capital University grad.
Chad and I from the Ohio State University College of Law.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard wrong then. So
Yeah. So I actually am in the energy industry. I work for a company actually that is headquartered near Philadelphia, but I'm a remote employee and have been remote for many years. So probably a little bit different than most folks do in terms of energy law, but that's where I lay my hat.
excellent.
So don't call me if your lights go out there, okay? It's not us. I can assure you that it's not us.
That's a deal. Chester, what type of law do you practice?
I do not. I practice staying at home.
Oh,
So
that's the
I'm
best.
very fortunate. The last 15 years of my working life, I've served as the Director of Human Resources for the City of Columbus.
Oh, okay.
And part of that responsibility included being at the bargaining table with the Fraternal Order of Police Capital City Lodge Number 9. So I think that plus the 8 years that I spent as an administrative law judge while working with the state of Ohio, I worked at the State Employment Relations Board. Between that experience and the HR experience and being an attorney, I think that's what intrigued me about this opportunity.
Excellent, excellent. I had a life in human resources before the law myself. I did 5 years in between undergrad and starting law school in human resources, finishing at the director level. So I can appreciate your background.
Fantastic.
I think
Likewise.
bring a lot to this group.
Thank you. It's a privilege.
everybody, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call the meeting to order here at 6:36. If Mr. Bajai is able to log in, I will certainly let him into the meeting at that time. If he doesn't make it here for the meeting, I'll reach out to him directly to make sure that he's able to view the video of the meeting and to answer any questions that he might have. So we're going to go ahead and get started here, and we start here with the roll call. Everybody has their agenda, and I want to do the roll call here a little bit differently than you ordinarily would see a roll call at a meeting. I want to go through and have everybody here introduce themselves, talk about yourself, your interest here in the Civilian Review Board, and that way everybody can get a little bit more familiar with each other because you are going to be spending a little bit of time with each other for this year and for next year. So I will go ahead and I'll start from the, I will go ahead and start with the bottom of the alphabet, and we will start with Raina Sims.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Shook. Yes, my name is Raina Sims. I work with the Ohio Commission on Minority Health as their program manager. Our organization works to reduce health disparities through policy and systems change, in addition to funding minority health disparity prevention grants across the state of Ohio. Of course, a part of that work does also include policy work and discussion around health equity and ensuring that there's equitable distribution of funds across the state to address health disparities, but also to make sure that there's always a presence at the table with regard to cultural diversity, cultural inclusion, equity with regard to all resources. So there's health in all policy. So with regard to the social justice issue, and racism now being declared a public health issue, it was really important to have a part and be at the table to be a part of the discussion to ensure that Reynoldsburg continues to put our best foot forward as it pertains to having equitable access to a positive experience with the police department and with all of our those that are out to protect and serve. So I wanted to make sure I was at the table and able to be a part of the solution.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Siobhan Ross.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Siobhan Ross. I am an assistant principal at Baldwin Road Junior High here in Reynoldsburg City Schools. I've been in the district for 5 years, started off as an English teacher. I'm heavily involved in the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our district. I have partnered with the Reynoldsburg Police Department previously on several occasions, coming into my classroom, actually helping with work in the community, getting my students involved. And it really started for me around the deaths of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, and my students at the high school level talking about that, and me wanting to kind of bridge the gap and not see that happen in my community. And that's what prompted me to reach out to the police department and try to build relationships with my young people in the department so that those things that I was seeing on TV wouldn't happen here in my community. And I feel like that was a successful partnership. I'm still close associates with some of the officers in the department today. And so I'm here, I'm moving forward, I'm pushing forward with the agenda of equity here in our schools, and I'm proud to be a part of this committee and this board to serve our community. Thank you.
We're happy to have you here. Thank you. Then I'm going to turn over to a fellow customer of Raider Nutrition, who I just happened to come across the other day, Eric Rogers.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everyone. I sort of gave everyone a preview, and I think our pre-chatter discussions during the meeting, but my name is Eric Rogers. I am a longtime resident in the city of Reynoldsburg, been here now for about 22 years, and have been practicing law for about 18 going on 19 years now. I am a business lawyer. That's been the crux of my practice, and I've do business litigation. I do some corporate transactions as well. I represent employers primarily in the state of Ohio. And I have a major client that I serve as general counsel for that entity and subsidiary entities as well too. So very happy to be here, very excited to be here. When I was first asked and approached to think about joining the board, I leapt at the opportunity. I kind of look at this group as sort of being pioneers, if you will. A lot of major metropolitan cities across the United States are putting together similar boards, but as far as I'm aware, at least in the Central Ohio area, Reynoldsburg is the first sort of suburban municipality that is doing this. So I look forward to being a pioneer, making it being a success, and hopefully that it will be replicated not only throughout the state of Ohio, but something that catches on nationwide as well too. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Attorney Rogers. And then I will turn it over to another attorney, Attorney Evelyn Robinson.
Thank you, Chris. Evelyn Robinson here. I am an attorney. I work in the energy industry and very pleased to be here. From my perspective, accountability and responsibility go hand in hand. And I really want to see Reynoldsburg continue to make its wonderful mark, not only in Ohio, but throughout the world. I think we've got a really good setup to do it. And my first and best impressions of the city police officers is Officer Mike, who goes to Five Bean, where I have coffee every day. And getting to know him from on a personal basis has been really a treat for me. But I'm really here to serve and to make sure that our community and those who have responsibility to protect and serve us, that we know each other, respect each other, and actually protect each other. So that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Robinson. Next, I'm going to call on a recently retired sergeant of the Reynoldsburg Police Department, one of the finest members of the community that you will find, Sergeant Jeff Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Shook. Appreciate that. Yeah, I just retired back on January 15th. After 33 years with the department, I retired as a sergeant. I was one of the key trainers for the department for quite a few years, so I've had a lot of experience in training and so forth. I just hope that I can benefit the board with that perspective, and hopefully, the general idea is to make the department better, and hopefully I can be a big part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Fletcher. I see Carrie down there at the bottom of the screen.
Good evening, Attorney Shook. How are you, sir? Can you hear me okay here?
Very well. I can hear you. Thank you.
I do apologize for the non-video here. A little bit about myself. I am a business owner of UGES LLC, which deals in precious metals in the forms of gold coins and silver coins, as well as gold and silver bars. Not to go too far back, but I'm a 11-year resident of Reynoldsburg. After moving back from New Jersey to take care of my elderly parents who lived in another city in Ohio called Steubenville, not too far away, but it was not an area that I wanted to live in. But I could be close enough to pay gratitude if something were to go wrong. And unfortunately, they have both passed on, so I made my roots here. Decided to say this. When I came here, I started a business. My first aspect was actually a home security company called Protect My Spot Home Security. So what we did there is we would offer discounted monitored security systems to the community because I didn't have a multi-million-dollar budget like ADT. So I didn't have big rames in the yard saying, don't try that. I couldn't afford it at that time. However, we did provide a very reputable and good service to people, as well as for the elderly as well, to give them free installs, because even though you may be lower on the income scale, you still need actually security, and you're entitled to that. I believe that as well too. So I wholeheartedly want to help everyone out. But I've switched into my greater passion, which was precious metals. To say that is to say this: I've seen a wide spectrum of how people act on both sides of the fence. As far as people who were when I was in the security business, when people were trying to break in someone's home or doing something out of pocket, and also how those other forces and police officers reacted and helped it as well. So I have a wide view of how I see different things and why things work the way they do compared to maybe some other people. And that's why I wanted to join the community board here. And I was recommended by Ms. Meredith Lawson Rose, my neighbor. Also, I didn't get a chance last time to thank Ms. Jessica Rosenthal for the acceptance, and also Molly for the link as well too. So she's on the line. And that's my piece. I don't want to take a lot of time, but we'll get more into conversation later on down the line. I do apologize for the video again, but I'm in the middle of a work day with orders going out for silver because the silver squeeze is still on. So I apologize.
That's perfectly fine, Mr. Fletcher. We are happy to have you here.
Thank you very much.
The next person, member of the review board here, is the recent recipient of the Mel Clemens Community Award. And if you've ever been to a community event here in the city, you would see her. She's one of the most active volunteers in the city, and this is April Darling.
Can you guys hear me okay? Yes, okay. My apologies for the video as well. I'm in the middle of trying to do a few things with my kids and homework and things like that as well. So my apologies. I had to figure out which device would let me in. So my name is April Darling, as Mr. Shook so gracefully just introduced me. If you have seen any community events, usually I'm out there and about. I'm also PTO president and a couple of different PTOs in the district. I'm a member of the Lions Club and their event coordinator and such as things. I've partnered with RPD many times during my events, and I absolutely adore that and love having them out there. And I love serving the community and look forward to being a part of this board. And I'm very honored to have been nominated to be on this board. So.
Thank you, April. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And then last, but certainly not least, our third attorney on the board, Attorney Chester Christie.
Thank you very much, City Attorney Shook. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As I shared a little bit at the very beginning of our meeting, had the privilege of serving the last 16 years of my professional career before retirement as the Director of Human Resources for the City of Columbus. And in addition to it truly being a challenge, and I definitely consider it to have been a privilege, the main reason I mentioned that is because one of the principal responsibilities was the responsibility of negotiating collective bargaining agreements with 6 different unions, one of the largest of which was the Fraternal Order of Police. So it gave me an opportunity to gain some familiarity with kind of the ins and outs of the agreement with the FOP, and more importantly, some of the day-to-day activity of the officers. It also afforded me an opportunity to participate at the Columbus Police Academy, both police and fire academies. One of the things that we thought would be very beneficial as we sat through negotiations was to actually spend some period of time in the shoes of those with whom we were negotiating contracts. So I had an opportunity to do a ride along, had the opportunity again to spend a week at each of the 2 academies and gain some perspective there. I think in addition to that, prior to my human resources responsibilities, I had several years as an appointed administrative law judge with a state agency. So the state of Ohio Department of Youth Services in one instance, and then subsequently with the State Personnel Board of Review, and then after that, the State Employment Relations Board. Key to all of that really was being a neutral third party, having heard evidence brought by both sides of the litigation, and having had some exposure to that process of being a third party neutral. So I'm prayerful that each of those experiences will be beneficial as we proceed forward with the board. At the risk of being redundant, let me just say that I echo many of the sentiments that I've heard expressed by the other board members for what may have motivated them to seek this opportunity. And I just look very much forward to working with each of you. I'm married. My wife and I have been together for 38 years. We have 2 adult children and a 2-year-old grandson who keeps us on our toes on a regular basis. Thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Attorney Christie. Before we move on to the next portion of the agenda, I do want to go ahead and, for those who don't know me, I'll introduce myself. My name is Chris Shuck. I'm the city attorney here for the city of Reynoldsburg. I've been in office since January 2020. It is very much a relief to be on this meeting with other attorneys, and know that even if I need advice, I know I can look to you for that help as we move through this process. You know, I grew up in the Reynoldsburg area, and my wife and I have lived here now 10 years. This is I think this is an important endeavor for the city. Something that I know that I've said this before to others, that this was not something that was prompted by any of the events of last year, because we know that last year are not the only events that we have seen. This is something that the new council has wanted since they took office in early 2020. And so this is something that's very important to them, and I think important to the city, but it's also a new venture. And so there will be, I suspect, at times, some growing pains, and we will all learn throughout this process. And one of the wonderful things about, you know, our civilian review board and our legislation that created this board is that we always have the ability to take a look at things and change them and make modifications that we see we need to make throughout the process. And I know that council is always willing to do that. So if at any time, you know, either, you know, in this meeting or after this meeting, or at any time during your service on this board, you have thoughts, opinions, suggestions that you want to make about our ordinance, the board, its composition and process, please do not hesitate to reach out and make those suggestions. We're very fortunate here also on this meeting to be joined by Deputy Chief Rhonda Grizel, who recently joined the Reynoldsburg Police Department from the Columbus Police Department. She has been a tremendous addition, a breath of fresh air. And I think that we're all going to find that she's a great resource for our members in giving you that law enforcement perspective. We are also joined here, as if we don't already have enough attorneys in this meeting, and Lord knows we love to hear ourselves talk. We are also joined by my assistant city attorney, Darren Least, and I'll let Darren talk about himself, because I probably won't do as good a job describing him as an attorney as a person as he might be able to do.
Well, thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. My name's Darren Least. I've been a lawyer now for 22 years. I've lived almost my entire life on the east side of Columbus. Actually grew up in Truro Township. Like Eric, I started at Capital University Law School, but I finished at the Ohio State University Law School. So I think I've got, yeah, right, OH. I've got all the bases covered. My practice primarily over my 22-year legal career has been in the criminal defense area. And so I have I've changed my legal practice now, and then I'm serving as the assistant city attorney for Reynoldsburg in a prosecutorial fashion. I have a wealth of experience with law enforcement as well as the courts in the state of Ohio, as well as the federal courts. So I am very excited for the opportunity to work for the city of Reynoldsburg and its residents. I think this is just a wonderful board and opportunity, and I think that it will go a long way, I should say, in terms of not only addressing issues that are of concern to the residents, but also I think facilitate positive communication in the area of law enforcement and the citizens it serves. So I'm very excited. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I look forward to assisting in any way I can. So thank you, Chris, for the introduction.
Thank you, Darren. And I have to apologize. I kind of skipped over and stole the opportunity from the Deputy Chief to make her introduction, but I am going to turn it over to the Deputy Chief and ask her to talk a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Mr. Schick. My name's Rhonda Grizel. I spent almost 26 years with the City of Columbus, retiring at the rank of commander. I held several different assignments. I was a negotiator. As a commander, I was a patrol commander, training bureau commander. I started the Wellness Bureau, the Therapy Dog Program at Columbus Police, Property Crimes Bureau commander. So I got to see the division from lots of different places. And I have just loved the transition over to Reynoldsburg. I love the community. I love the department. I love the administration. And, you know, on behalf of Chief Baker, who couldn't be on tonight, I welcome this opportunity to work with the community. That is both of our goals, to try to increase our relationships, our transparency, and maintain the great relationship that we already know that we have in the community. So we welcome the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. The next portion of the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So that was a long roll call, but I certainly think it was worthwhile to learn more about ourselves. I am going to ask any member here to make a motion to approve the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Motion by Raina Sims. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Chester Christie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No. Agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is communications. And so I've already introduced myself, and this is what I've called the city attorney introduction. And it's not really about me on this. I'm going to give a brief overview of what the Civilian Review Board is and what your jurisdiction is. Later on in this meeting, Deputy Chief Grizel will go through the training process, and then after she goes through that, I'm going to talk in a little bit more detail about what the appeal process looks like should a matter come before the board. So first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, this is a new venture for the city, and as Attorney Rogers had talked about, it is new for a suburban community, so for a community of our size. And while larger metropolitan cities have implemented and developed civilian review boards in their larger communities, a community the size of Brownsburg has never tried this before. So we are going to try to see if what they do in those bigger cities can work for us here. I believe it can. I don't think that there's any marked difference between how you review police conduct in a large city and how you review one in a city where you have approximately 40,000 people. But certainly I think there are things that we will, of course, learn along the way. So the composition of the board, as you can see, we have 9 members. 4 of those members are ward representatives and 5 are appointed by the mayor. We have 3 attorneys, and we have a retired sergeant of the Brownsburg Police Department. We have an administrator with the school district. We have a Mel Clemens award winner. We have a great group of diverse representation here from the community in terms of life experience and how that will benefit this organization. The Civilian Review Board acts as a quasi-judicial board, which means that you sit for all practical purposes when you hear an appeal in a somewhat judicial capacity. You hear evidence, you make a decision, you determine what the facts are. And so it is very important, and I think it's very beneficial to the board that we have such strong legal experience here to help guide us. I'll help you where I can, but I certainly think that the experience that we have is strong in that regard. Tonight, later in the meeting, we are going to elect officers of the board. We will need to elect a chair of the board and a vice chair. And in all future meetings, the chair will go ahead and preside over the meeting. So this is the only opportunity I'll have to lead a meeting of this nature. And that's probably a good thing, because I like many attorneys, I talk way too much. The chair is also the spokesman for the board. So as you might anticipate, there could be matters that come before you, cases that come before you that might draw some attention from the media, local media, for example. And the chair of the board speaks for the board when it comes to that type of communication. The chair of the board also signs off on all documents that are approved by the board. So decisions that are made by the board, those are signed off on by the chair. The vice chair responsibility is actually very simple. The vice chair serves as chair when the chair is absent, and takes on all those same responsibilities that the chair would have. We do have training requirements, and Deputy Chief will go into some more significant detail about what those requirements are, what the schedule will be for meeting those requirements. But as the ordinance sets out, each member of the board is required to complete the recently created Civilian Police Academy, and also to complete 4 hours of a ride-along, at least 4 hours of a ride-along with a police officer. I can tell you, having done a ride-along, they are tremendously eye-opening, to be in that chair, to see what the officers see from the position that they are usually in. So those are training requirements that we will make arrangements for each member of the board to meet. We will adopt rules of the board after the chair is elected in tonight's meeting. I will work with the elected chair to draft the procedural rules of the Civilian Review Board. And at the next meeting of the board, we will present those rules to you for review and potential approval or amendment. So the chair is going to have some responsibilities, and unfortunately for the chair, you're going to have to work a little bit with me on making sure that we get those rules drafted, and that they work well for what our board wants to accomplish. I want to talk about what your authority is, what your duties and your responsibilities are. So I'm going to share my screen here if I can. I'm not the most technologically savvy person. Okay, so under section 163.05, this sets out the authority and jurisdiction of the Civilian Review Board. The board has the power to receive, cause investigation of, and recommend resolution of any and all complaints filed with the board that allege discriminatory conduct by officers or non-sworn employees of the Reynoldsburg Division of Police, regardless of their duty status, when such discriminatory conduct is directed towards any person who is not a Division of Police employee. Discriminatory conduct is defined as discrimination or bias directed toward any person who is not a Division of Police employee on the basis of that person's race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, religion, national origin, disability, ancestry, family status, or military status. That is the jurisdiction of the board. Now, we will go through the process of how that jurisdiction is invoked later on in the meeting, and what the process is when you have a complaint brought before you. Does anyone, though, at this time have any questions about the information I just went over? Okay. All right. Then at this time, we're going to move on to the next agenda item. This is motions. So I think before I ask for a motion on this, I would ask the members, is there anyone who is overly interested in serving as the chair of this board? Then someone's probably going to get drafted.
I am not overly interested, Chris, but if there is a market lack of interest from the board, then I would step up.
Appreciate that, Attorney Rogers. Well, with that, do I have a motion?
I'll motion for that.
Second.
All right, I didn't get who made the first motion on that.
I did.
April Darling, and a second by Evelyn Robinson.
Yes.
And that is for Eric Rogers to be appointed as the chair of the Civilian Review Board.
Yes.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And is anyone opposed? All right. Eric Rogers, you are now the chair of the First Reynoldsburg Civilian Review Board. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, board members.
Congratulations, sir.
Should Mr. Rogers ever be unable to serve in his role as chair, we do need to appoint a vice chair. Is there anyone interested in serving as vice chair?
This is Raina Sims. I'd be interested in serving as vice chair.
Okay, all right. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Everyone's so moved.
All right, I didn't get the first one. I'm going to say the motion was made by Evelyn Robinson and seconded by Chester Christie. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and that is for Raina Sims to serve as vice chair of the Civilian Review Board. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Is there
Aye.
anyone opposed? No one opposed? Ms. Sims, you are the first vice chair of the
Thank you.
Civilian Review Board. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Congratulations.
And with that, we are prepared to move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the training overview. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Deputy Chief Rhonda Grizel.
Thank you, sir. So the first evening will be March 25th. We set a time of 6 to 8 p.m. Our goal isn't necessarily to always go 2 hours. We made it 2 hours. We're looking mostly at it, probably an hour and a half, somewhere in between there for most of the sessions. Some of them might run a little bit long, particularly when we do scenarios. And Sergeant Gregory has extensive knowledge about that, but those are more labor intensive to pull off. So we may ask you to spend a little bit more time with us on that evening as we move down this agenda, and I'll let you know when that date is. So the first night, we're just going to kind of welcome you, give you a tour of our building, let you see our home. We're going to talk a little bit about law enforcement in general. We're also going to give you a survey. I don't even know if we have it completed yet. We're still working on that. We have a lot of things that we're working on for you. On April 1st, it will be week number 2. It's an introduction to all the different assignments and specialized positions in the department. As part of that, there's going to be a canine demonstration, which will be outside. And the schedule that we sent you said to be prepared for that. The third class, April 8th, we're going to talk about traffic crashes and law enforcement, enforcement of traffic codes. And you're going to learn how to shoot a laser and see how fast a car is going. So you know what that will look like. We'll be outside for part of that class as well. We're going to talk about why we do traffic enforcement. And I think you'll find that enlightening. April 15th will be the 4th class. We're going to talk about, and most likely, I believe the chief is going to be talking about this. We're going to talk about all the basic case law that really directs law enforcement, the legal standards by which we judge our actions and apply case law when we do administrative investigations and such. Most of you already have had those crash courses in law school. So hopefully you don't find it boring. Chief Baker is a pretty interesting speaker. He's also an attorney, by the way. So we're also going to do, as part of that, we're going to do some basic defensive tactics maneuvers. So they're asking that you dress accordingly for that. April 22nd, we're actually going to do firearms. You're going to get to shoot one of our Glocks. It will be very, very safe. I assure you of that. And if anything makes anyone uncomfortable, you don't have to participate, but your presence and just observing it would be fine as well. So if at any time anyone feels uncomfortable, all you have to do is let the instructors know, and we'll make that accommodation. We're going to be doing scenarios that particular day, and this is the day that it might take a little bit longer because we do have safety protocols, and in order for those scenarios to be done properly, it takes extra people and it takes time to get through them, do a little bit of feedback. So that's one evening where it might be a little bit more than 2 hours, just as a heads up. They are also asking that you dress casual because obviously there's going to be some physical activity. April 23rd through May 5th, you'll be scheduled for at least 4 hours right along. So, I think it's important to, as Mr. Shook said, to actually be out in the environment. I still remember my very first day on the street, and it was so strange being in a marked car and everybody literally, you being the center of attention. And it's just interesting perspective. And then May 6th will be the last class. It'll be an open forum with Chief Baker, and you'll have his ear for however long you want to. We do have it scheduled 6 to 8. I think that'll be an adequate time. And then we're going to give you an exit survey. This, as Mr. Shook said, is our very first Citizens Police Academy. I know it's something that Chief Baker has wanted to implement. So this really was the impetus that pushed it forward, to have us welcome you into RPD and then just give you an overview of the best topics that we could, not make it too long, but just enough that you get a taste of law enforcement and front row seat of it. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to entertain that. Okay, hearing no questions, I'll go ahead and mute.
Okay, well, thank you, Deputy Chief. I appreciate that. And then the last agenda item that we have is the appeal process overview. And I'm going to keep this relatively short. Each member here of the board has a copy of the ordinance, and that sets it out pretty clearly what the process looks like. And so if you have any questions at all, you can reach out to me about that process. But at its core, your jurisdiction is essentially appellate. The complaint process begins, and I'm going to try and share my screen again. There's your schedule. Okay. Now the complaint process begins when a citizen files a complaint with the Division of Police. And that citizen alleges that a police officer engaged in conduct that discriminated against that citizen for one of the reasons that we talked about earlier. The initial complaint is investigated by the police department. It's typically investigated by one of the lieutenants in the police department, and they will issue findings and recommendations to the chief. If the chief, after reviewing the findings and recommendations from the internal investigation, determines that the complaint has no merit or only has merit in part, the chief will inform the complainant, who will then have the ability to appeal that determination directly to you, the Civilian Review Board. And at that point, the case will get transmitted directly to the board, and the responsibility of beginning the conduct of appellate investigation will fall to the chair of the board in consultation with my office. As part of the appellate process, you will have the right to receive a full copy of the case file, which includes police reports, videos, whether cruiser videos or body-worn cameras, and internal investigation investigator notes. You can request additional evidence that you might think might be appropriate. Notice is provided to both the complainant, the person making that appeal to the board, and also to the officer or officers who are the subject of the complaint. And then the matter gets set for a hearing that would take place before the board. There has been some discussion about subpoena power. The board does have some subpoena power. You can require the attendance of certain witnesses, the production of certain documents. The board does not, however, have the power to subpoena an individual officer. That responsibility falls to the supervisory officers in the police department, who direct their officers to appear and testify before the board. We've had a lot of discussions, both with the supervisory personnel of the police department, our rank and file officers, and with the Fraternal Order of Police about how we expect that process to go. If we find that we are having difficulties with cooperation on that, that is, again, one of those issues that can come back before council to review whether to give the review board subpoena power at that time. The hearing process is that it operates very much like a trial. So for the attorneys here on the board, you probably have a pretty strong understanding of what that looks like. But for everyone else, you know, the hearing process is about receiving the evidence that would either support or refute the appeal from the complainant, listening to testimony from witnesses, having those witnesses be subject to potential cross-examination, either by an attorney for the complainant, to which they are entitled, or an attorney for the officer, to which they are entitled, or questions that may be presented by either myself or from individual members of the board. After receiving the evidence, the board members will be able to deliberate. Deliberations of the board as a quasi-judicial body are not required to be in an open meeting. So you are able to deliberate your findings in private. Once we are able to do meetings in person again, we do have a city council conference room where that is quite appropriate for deliberations and should provide enough space for each member to engage in those deliberations. During your deliberations, the findings that you are able to reach fall under 4 different categories. One category is sustained. So if you were to find by a preponderance of the evidence that the conduct of the officer was discriminatory towards the complainant, then you would issue a sustained finding. Conversely, if you were to find by a preponderance of the evidence that the officer's actions were consistent with Division of Police policy, procedure, and training, you would issue a finding of exonerated. If you were to find that the alleged conduct did not occur, and this is a little bit different from exoneration, this would mean that essentially there was no basis for the complainant to have presented what they presented, you would issue what we call an unfounded finding. And that is only slightly different than an exonerated finding. And then finally, if you were to find that neither the complainant nor the evidence in support of the officer's position were more likely than not to support one side or the other, you would issue a finding of insufficient evidence. Now, those findings that you make and those votes would take place in an open meeting. And then the final summary would be prepared by the board chair in consultation with my office and then re-presented to the board for a vote. One thing I want to be clear about, and Mr. Christie probably understands this as well as anybody if he has worked with the Fraternal Order of Police before in negotiations, is that we do have a contract with our police officers. They are members of a union, the Fraternal Order of Police, and consequently we have a collective bargaining agreement. As part of that collective bargaining agreement, the final decision about whether an officer violated a policy that would subject them to discipline, that final decision has to rest with the chief of police and with the mayor. So the final summary, let's say the board were to issue a sustained finding, that would get presented to the mayor and the chief of police, and then they would make a determination that based upon their review of that final summary, whether they agree with it and whether they are going to issue their own finding that the officer violated policy. And then if they make that decision, they can move on to discipline. I know that in a lot of public discussion about civilian review boards, not just here in Reynoldsburg, but in other communities and probably most prominently in Columbus, there's been a lot of discussion about giving the review boards the ability to make binding findings and to recommend discipline or to impose discipline. With our current collective bargaining agreement with the Fraternal Order of Police, we could not give this board that kind of power, or we would have been in breach of that agreement. It is important for us to maintain our contractual obligations to our union police officers in the collective bargaining process. But what this process most assuredly does is that it provides transparency. When these complaints are made, there are internal investigations conducted, and most of the time the public never hears about any of that, the findings, the investigation process itself. This is a process by which we are able to bring that out into the open, into an open meeting, and give members of the community the ability to be able to review that information and to be able to provide their intelligent and learned opinion to the mayor and to the chief of police that they can rely upon. And that is very important. And this is the start of a new process here, of course, for the city. And I think that we are all looking forward to seeing what imperfections might be there in this process that we can work on going forward. I think and I hope we are all very open-minded individuals about what that is. And I appreciate that each and every one of you have agreed to participate in this process, understanding what that process looks like. And with that, I am going to ask if anybody has any questions.
Yes, Attorney Shuck, question. As we begin to get the board ramped up and prepared to undertake these duties, will we have access to a copy of the current Reynoldsburg Police Department policies and procedures and the collective bargaining agreement so that we have a sense of what's there and how it relates to the ordinance that's been passed?
Yes, those are actually public records, so we can certainly provide those to members of the board.
Thank you.
Now, I will warn you that the policies and procedures of the police department are voluminous, and they are not exactly an easy read. They are not a John Grisham book. The pages don't turn by themselves. And the collective bargaining agreement can be very similar, but you'll know which sections to turn right to get an understanding of what you need.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
You may know this. If you want to get in and dive into that contract tonight, if you go to the State Employee Labor Relations website or Service Board website, you can look up the contract by jurisdiction, and it would be FOP 9 for the officers in Reynoldsburg Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. Is that right, Jeff? For the supervisors. They're similar in nature. If you're dying to read it.
Thank you for that.
Yep, you're welcome.
And I can send each member of the board here an email before I leave the office today, giving you a copy of the FOP contract. I don't have the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association contract in my office, but I can send you the FOP contract.
Perfect. That would be great, Chris. Thank you.
Very good question. Thank you, Attorney Reimers. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So how often will the board be meeting? Will this be an every month meeting, Mr. Shook?
It will not.
Okay.
In fact, and I said this when council was voting on the civilian review board, and it was also said at the meeting where all the members were nominated and appointed. Ideally, you would never receive a complaint. That will probably not happen. You probably will get 1, 2, maybe more. But ideally, you would never receive one, and you wouldn't have to meet to review something like that. So it will be on an as-needed basis. We will schedule a subsequent meeting to go over the rules of the board that are drafted between myself and Chair Rogers. But after that, all further meetings of the board will be on an as-needed basis when an appeal comes through.
Okay. Thank you.
So I warn you, ideally, you will be very bored.
I'm never bored, Mr. Shook.
Any other questions?
Oh, I have one more. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So if I read the correct, this is the more of a question for the deputy chief because I didn't ask it earlier. If I read what she sent us, we are to meet at the PD for all of our training, for all of our Citizen Police Academy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. If for some reason they're going to change the location, they would tell you the meeting prior so that
Okay.
you would know, but I don't anticipate that changing at all.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if available, I intend to also participate in the Civilian Police Academy. So you can all laugh at me in that process if you like. One thing I want to note is that one of the main differences between how often you might see the review board that they're creating in Columbus meet and how often this board might meet is that in Columbus, they have over 1,800 police officers. Here we have anywhere between 65 and 70 at any one time. And that's because we're a much smaller city, of course. So the odds of you meeting as frequently as the Columbus Civilian Review Board are microscopically small. Any other questions? Okay, any other matters that any member of the board would want to bring to the attention of the other members? Does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I would just
So
like to give before we go, I would just like to give a salute to rest in peace, Mel Clemens. He was my neighbor on Firth Drive when I first moved here in Reynoldsburg for several years. He was a very dynamic guy, very friendly and very kind. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. We had an ongoing joke that he promised that I had to take to my grave with me, that I had a nickname for him. I called him the Living Legend. And I promised I could not tell a reason why, because I promised him I'd take it to the grave with me. But rest in peace, Mel Clemens. So I just wanted to say that real quick as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Mel was a wonderful community advocate, and there's a reason why we named our community service award after him, and there's a reason why Miss Darling was a recipient of that award.
Thank you, Mr. Shook.
I think we have. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Shook,
yes.
real quick before we adjourn, I'd just like to add thank you for assembling the group together with the help of Mayor Began. I'd like to thank each of the board members for agreeing to serve, and I'd like to personally thank each one of you for entrusting the chair position with me. I humbly accept that, and I do not take that lightly. And in the days to come, please be expected to hear from me I will see if I can get contact information assembled. And I'd like to reach out to each of you individually just so that we can better place the name with the face and begin the process of building bridges and communication so that we can all work together effectively. So thank you so much. I won't bore anyone else with my talking, and I'll turn it over to whoever was making a motion. I think Ms. Robinson was, I believe.
So moved.
Motion to
Seconded.
adjourn seconded by, I didn't see, did that?
Seconded. I did.
Okay, motion by Evelyn Robinson, second by Chair Rogers. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, very much, not just for being here tonight, but for being willing to be a part of this process.
Thank you very much. It's an honor. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.